It's a pleasure to be here. And I'll tell you right off the bat, I'm going to go through my slides a lot faster than I ever had before in the interest of time, which is running short, because we had a good opportunity to do a healthy Q&A just a few minutes ago. This slide presents some of the issues that I have identified in my analysis with my team. And I go through this process for a number of communities across the country. I've worked on this in this capacity for about 20 years, and I have about 24 different projects that are currently active, or I've recently worked on, or I'm about to start in. You can see this list of issues. I'm not going to read it for you. You can perfectly well take a look at it yourself. All of my comments, my full presentation, are posted on the website for my organization, Environmental Stewardship Concepts, and for DRCC. But we recognize at this site, as with many others, that fish consumption, seafood consumption, is the primary, it's not the exclusive, it's the primary route of exposure. So that's the point of attack, and you've heard that from EPA, and it's true here, and it's true for a number of sites around the country. And you've also heard, which is also true around the country, that we have few options for addressing contaminated sediments. Now, happily, even within the last 10 years, some new equipment, some new methods, some new technologies have come available. And while EPA has come to this proposed plan using what's available now, one of the comments that I will be making to them is that I hope they will leave the door open so that in a couple of years, when some of those piloting and trial technologies that are going to be taken care of this summer come to fruition and prove their worth, that they will be able to incorporate them into an improved cleanup plan down the future. The other thing I want to point out here is that last item on the bottom of the slide, an institutional control, is not a remedy for cleaning up. It controls your behavior. The control of your behavior is to protect you. That is to keep you out of harm's way and to keep you insulated from exposure to those chemicals, to the contaminants that are not only in the bottom of the river, but are also in the animals that live there. Which, by the way, is the same problem that the animals living in the river face, consuming one another. When the marine mammals come in to feed, it's just like you feeding on animals that live in the river. That's their primary exposure path. So those methods, those options are combined in several different technologies, as you heard Allison describe, and the proposed plan combines them in a particular way that addresses the acreage that is divided up in this fashion from a slide taken from EPA's document. 62% of the surface area, the acreage, will be left for monitored natural recovery, 20% for active dredging or removal, and the rest of it through capping or natural recovery of some fashion. I just want to point out, as several people have noted, that natural recovery in this particular case means burial from sediments coming down the Green River. That depends upon getting clean sediments coming down the Green River, which means that the integrated source control has to be effective, it has to be enforceable, and one of my comments will also be to make sure that the final record of decision has a fully enforceable and legally required source control plan in the final document, so that when those of us who've been on the stage and are involved with this process now have retired, the next generation of people will be fully as dedicated as you've heard Dan Cargill. The other point that we want to make is that the fish consumption advisories that are currently in place are the principal route for institutional controls used at contaminated sediment sites across the country. And we want EPA to go beyond that. We want EPA to go beyond simply posting fish consumption advisories. One reason is that they are not as effective as they should be or they hope to be. In fact, when we go down to Portland just a few years ago, the city of Portland had to post fish consumption advisories in 12 languages, and still they didn't work. They didn't achieve their objective to keep people from eating contaminated fish. There are a variety of social and cultural reasons for it, but one of them also has to do with being able to address not just individual behavior, but also the community itself, going to the point that Rochelle had made with regards to environmental justice, which is an aspect of the cumulative community risk in all of this. Now, EPA's analysis indicates that if you implement their proposed plan, that there will be reductions in the cancer risk to people, but they don't reach the real ideal regulatory levels as required by the Model Toxics Control Act of Washington until sometime down the road, 17 years, and you have to keep reducing your fish consumption rate far below the 3 meals a month. The same pattern is true if you look at non-cancer risk. That is, for a tribal child, which is the most sensitive that we all use for estimating risks from seafood consumption for health effects, we find that you have to really reduce the seafood consumption, which is changing human behavior and not really addressing the problem in where it starts. Now, the other point that I want to make here is that there are several different options for achieving the same endpoint in the same approximate time period. Allison mentioned the several different options. There are 12 different options listed here, and these are different aspects of them, including the area that they address and the time, et cetera, et cetera. Don't focus on those. Don't try and memorize the numbers. Look at that circle down in the lower right. These 3 options all get to the same endpoint in about 16 or 17 years. If there is another way to do it, then combine them differently. You can either get there faster or get to a better point in the same time period. Turning to the EJ analysis, there are a couple of things that are well pointed out that you've already heard about, and I'm not going to repeat them because, well, time is short. There are a couple of issues, however, that I and the people at the RCC who've looked at the EJ analysis have focused on. One of them that's really important is that this is a question of cumulative risk, which means the community is at risk. It's not just individuals who are getting increased health effects, adverse health effects, from eating contaminated seafood. There's a whole community issue here from living around a Superfund site. Now, this particular site is the first time that that's been analyzed with an environmental justice analysis, but EPA has not, for the first time, considered this question of cumulative community risk. In fact, it's been going on for a number of years now, largely instituted at the headquarters level. However, there is no place that I know of in the country where EPA has effectively been able to take that next step, not for lack of trying, not for lack of wanting to. We haven't gotten to the point of knowing how to take action steps. So we're going to be making some recommendations to EPA in our comments on the proposed plan about what they can do. And if you have suggestions for what they can do for the community risk level, they're happy to hear them. And I want to read them too, because I work on technical panels helping EPA try and understand how to implement what they understand once they know what the community risk issues are. I have to point out this sort of discrepancy as well. I pointed it out before, and I wouldn't want to let it go that, you know, EPA made a reference in the proposed plan to the environmental justice analysis, and that sort of reference is a little loose and we couldn't find it there. Maybe I missed something. So in the final end, what we need to do is ensure that the project will work, ensure that we have enough certainty and enough permanence that in 15 years and 20 years, we're not coming back there and saying, oops, we didn't quite get it because we missed something in the beginning. Removal is the most certain and it's the most permanent option for getting rid of those contaminants and being sure that we don't have a liability down the road, liability for the institutions, financial liability, or health liabilities. Therefore, we're recommending greater removal and make greater use of enhanced natural recovery, not monitored natural recovery. To do this, we have to recognize that modern dredging techniques and methods have changed dramatically even since the start of this project. There's equipment now being used out of the Great Lakes that was not available in the United States 10 years ago. There are methods used to treat and decontaminate toxic chemicals and sediments that were not available even 5 years ago, some of which are being piloted this summer in other parts of the country. We also know that having watched dredging operations and seeing things go wrong, that we've learned how to do it right. Up on the Hudson River, over on the Delaware River, down on the James River, we've learned what can go right, what can go wrong, how can monitored natural recovery not be a problem, and how can dredging not be a problem. And we can do it so that when we monitor, we know that we're getting the good results that we wanted. We've already talked about source control and the necessity of integrating a required source control. Now, EPA knows this and the state knows this. They need to hear from you that you support that. They're going to hear it from me, they're going to hear it from DRCC, that this source control needs to be an aggressive, legally required component of a perfect almost perfect cleanup plan. We also have to remember that we have to protect our fishing communities, not just from contaminated fish that they might eat, that we don't want them to, but looking at the whole community so that there's access to the river, there's more green spaces, there are jobs, there's support for cultural activities and cultural work in the river so that the whole watershed at the community level is protected. One of the important elements of this is starting the monitoring before the end of the cleanup project. Start the monitoring now. Just like I recommend that they start the pilot projects now. Why wait 5 years? Get them going now so that we'll know in 5 years if some of those experimental or pilot activities will be successful. I think that'd be a great thing to do. So let's monitor air quality, water quality, fish tissues, starting as soon as possible so that we have a good baseline and that every 6 months or every year we have a status report, a report card on how we're doing with the cleanup so that EPA can come back and say, yeah, we're doing it right. Or they can say, we're doing it well, but we could do it better by changing the way we operate this, using more of those, using less of those. And that approach is in use now across the country. A pollution prevention fund will help to mitigate ongoing risks, and it will also help to build a stronger future for the community. One of those efforts is going on right now, and I understand that the initial job effort and job training program through the Superfund Job Training Program Act is in place starting today. Comment is in 2 weeks from tomorrow. Please, make a contribution. There is nothing so powerful as an activated community, an involved and engaged community. Somebody asked me if I've ever seen EPA change their proposed plans. Yeah, only when the community involvement is high. Thank you.